Hello, hello, most beautiful stars. Hello, hello. You are at Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies, and we are in chapter 5 and 6 of Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation. Hooty hoo! Welcome, everybody, in. I am live, and I am Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light. It is good to see Chloe and Jackie and Seeker of Truth Shelley in the chat. Good to see you, ladies. Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies is live every Wednesday at some point, unless I'm having to work an event or traveling or whatnot. I try to make it on Wednesdays. We are either in his bio or in one of his source materials. This show is chapter 5 and 6, I believe. Yes. Of Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation. And Lori's in the house. Good to see you, my dear. So, welcome, beautiful stars. I hope you are well. I hope you are safe, especially if you are in the northern hemisphere of the United States, as massive storms have been running through and the fires in California. Do know that Friday at 11 a.m. in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, uh, is my normal go-to show for all things esoteric, mystical, higher education, higher self, all that jazz. And right now I am covering a very lengthy 2025 Akashic message. In that message, it talks about the fires. We haven't really covered it yet, but we're already starting to see them. It is not to be fearful of. I will go into further explanation as to where we're at with that message this Friday, 11 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, whatever that is for you. So, good day, good evening. I hope you are all well, and that you are safe and warm and protected and joyful, comfy, all the good stuff. So, in chapter in chapter 4 in here, we had been discussing kind of two aspects. The physical, and he started going into the emotional aspect of karma. So we are discussing karma. And as many of you that have been here for a while, I have a little bit of a different take on it. Mostly because I'm trying to move people out of this dogma concept that is usually attached to karma, right? That when something tragic is happening, many people kind of chuck it all up to karma. I'm not saying that that's not, I'm not saying that that is not necessarily an aspect of truth there. I'm saying that there's a whole nother series of understanding that we can work through. Now, what we're going to be talking tonight is more emotional karma that is attached to a current life, and also vocational, meaning your job, right? With both of these, because he kind of started with emotional and then he moved it into another chapter, chapter 5, gave a few more case studies to kind of drive home the point of emotional karma, especially related to fear. And then in chapter 6, he goes into vocational. I'm going to be covering all this. There is a concept that is being delivered in these chapters as to you occasionally can have just a standard life. And at the very end of chapter 6, it is reported that Cayce would inform people that about every sixth life of all the lives that you live, but every sixth life is kind of just, he calls it a comfort life. You kind of get to take a break. And so what that looks like is just a standard life. Nothing too grandiose and spectacular, and nothing too traumatic and harmful. It's just a life. So we're going to be kind of moving in and out of these aspects of karma and when karma takes a break. Whoever thought that happened, right? where you get to just have a life that's just a standard life. There's nothing too much you're working through. And I will tell you, folks, I've seen many of those, many, many, many of those lives. So I do believe that karma, quote unquote, whatever our need is to fulfill, to learn, to challenge, to walk through, takes a break. And for me in this message, from start to finish, regardless of a life taking a break, regardless of our discussion on karma, I want to really focus on how all things in 3D, so the life we're living, right, here on Earth, third dimensional consciousness, all things in 3D are designed for you to choose yourself. And not in a, grandiose, narcissistic way, not, and definitely not in a codependency way, not in any unhealthy choice of self, but a healthy choice of self. All things that occur are truly there to help you elevate into higher conscious fields of existence. So even though we go through quote unquote karmic emotional damage, karmic vocational aspects, karmic what have you, all things in 3D are designed for you to begin to choose yourself and work yourself out of that. It does not need to exist. So I see that Big Dad Standing Tall came in. Good to see you, Neil. Good to see everybody. So thank you for listening. And because I am live, I do try to engage with the chat a bit. So if you have any questions, you can funnel them through. Please put them in all caps so I don't lose them amongst the discussion. Okay, so with emotional karma in chapter 5, he gave two different case studies because the majority of this book, which is the original copy from 1969, this was written in 1969, folks, and this is the original. And the author is a great author. I mean, he's old school. He writes very beautifully and poetically. Because he adds prose a bit as to telling the backstory to these case studies. For emotional karma, they were focusing on fear. Like fear that we have that we can't find the root to, right? Just standard stuff that is like, where is this coming from? This has never even occurred in my life. So why am I so afraid of it? And it is linked to past lives. There's many, um, I'm going to put this out there, and I've had to tell young people this a lot, um, in my past work. There are reasons why African Americans here in the States, Black people here in the States, are afraid to swim, folks. That goes back to past life stuff. Or afraid of dogs, even if they've never been attacked by dogs. Past life stuff. For myself, when I was young and I had to work through it, I had to get through it. Any little rodents, mice, rats, if I was in your house and a mouse ran across the floor, most of us would not, I mean, it's okay, it's a mouse, we have to handle it, but I would be jumping on furniture. I'd be so terrified of a mouse. I had to work through it. Once again, back to one of my past lives where I was chained up in, a crypt, a cellar, what have you, a dungeon, right? And I couldn't do anything about all the rodents crawling all over me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get them off. I was chained up. Well, then in Little Courtney, young Courtney, because I had that all the way until my young adult years, until I worked through it, going, "You're not afraid of mice. You're not afraid of this. You're not afraid of that. Come on, you're way bigger than them," right? I had to work through it, but I knew where it came from. I knew it was because of that. So a lot of people were walking around with these fears, just different. It could be random to you, but we can't pinpoint it. It could be big fears that we somewhat understand. So I'm going to get into that a bit, but I want to just kind of emphasize that sometimes when people are expressing some of the things that they're afraid of, we might not need to laugh it off or say, "Oh, it's nothing," because we don't know energetically where that originated. So when I was growing up and I would freak out over a mouse, I mean, really freak out, folks. Um, I would be laughed at by my peers, or whomever, which I understand. I mean, I have compassion because I really did. I freaked out. Um, But as an adult, we can maybe understand some of this. We can also help our kids. There's so many young kids that I know. Most kids are experiencing past life issues, memories, dreams, fears that they are either verbally trying to express, or when they wake up in the morning, they're just kind of in an off mood. And when you ask them, "Are you okay?" They don't really want to talk about it. They might not know how to express this wild dream that they're trying to sort out that is actually very much linked to past lives. So in their expression of this stuff, we can maybe have the awareness that they are experiencing things that have nothing to do with the current life. And I will tell you the age bracket for them are usually about 3 to 5 is like when they're saying stuff. They're talking about things. We don't know where they're coming from. Then there's usually kind of a little bit of let's say, slowly that stuff kind of dissolves away between like 6 and 7. And it's really because that's when we're putting them into school. They're having to refocus on other things. So other education and living takes over. But then it can kinda come back into surface around 8, 9, 10, those tween years, and it's definitely more of these arbitrary fears. They might not be having the dreams, or they might not be saying much, but all of a sudden, you notice that child is afraid of something that, there's no explanation to. So please know that a lot of us go through these things, and it is linked to past lives. Now, do we put that in the category of karma necessarily? I do, in aspects of karma. But why I kind of I don't speak against karma, I just try to put more clarity to what karma is. Many people in today's world, karma has become such a cliche. And so what an example of that would be, like an arbitrary fear that we had as a child, even into young adult, possibly even to this day, that is what I refer to as like karmic residue, like negative karmic residue. That it's not anything that's really going to damage our living experience, right? Me being afraid of mice is not going to change my existence completely, derail me from my path. It's just one of those things that is a karmic negative residue because all is energy. And so that's just one of those little things that just filters through into a new life. So karma is actually a very broad concept. I try to bring clarity to it, and then I try to expose it that at any time we can change it up. At any time we can work through it. At any time we can make new choices. You have no idea when I moved into my first place by myself as a young adult, yeah, there were mice. And I was like, I gotta get over this. I live here. Not only do I have to figure out what to do with them, I have to get over it. I live here. And so I would, just start talking to myself, start talking to the mice, saying, you got to go and you will go, or I will have you go. That sort of thing. Like I had to work through it. So we can. One of the examples that they gave, though, was a very physical reaction to a karmic fear, an emotional fear. So at one point, there were these two sisters, and one of them reached out to Edgar for a reading. And he informed her, like, hey, you were so and so in Virginia during the Revolutionary War. You grew up here in America. He just kind of told her all this stuff. Well, the two sisters then decided to take a trip because it was reported like you can find documentation of who you were. Here's the name. There's actually your grave site is in this town. Um, so the two sisters decided to go visit. The first night they got there, I think they went to the grave site and found it, and then they're staying in a hotel that night. And of course, they're just talking, and then at night they're asleep. The one sister woke up to the girl who had the reading. I believe her name was Patricia. Patricia was the one who actually had the reading and was there to look up who she used to be, in historical societies. That night, her sister woke up to hearing her gasping for air, gasping. And her sister's looking at her, and it's as if she's in this deep sleep, almost coma state, but yet as if she's being choked, like her all of her sorry, I'm pausing for a moment. All of her breath was being released or being choked out of her. Her face started changing colors. She was just kind of laying there as if she's being choked out. The sister continuously could not wake her up. They called the local doctor. He came running through. He couldn't wake her up. Eventually, they got her awake enough to then get in the car and basically leave that town. Once she was out of town, all of that subsided. So it was a very physical reaction to fear. And once she was out of that town and everything was safe and she was back to normal, she started explaining to people that something a huge amount of fear came over her, and it's as if it took over all of her senses, all of her physical senses. So the body functioning, all of our able to speak, breathe, all of it, move. It's as if she was just locked in place, suffocating, couldn't move. Well, then they contacted Edgar again and told him all this. Like, we went, we visited, we did the thing. We didn't even get to finish looking at all the records. This is what happened. It was such an immense amount of fear that took over all of my senses. Thank goodness my sister was with me. Edgar then did another reading for them, for Patricia. And in that reading, he had to explain that in her past life in Virginia, that life was very traumatic, very difficult. And at one point, she was in the cellar where they would, stock all the vegetables, all the goods. And this is during the revolution. Everything was being stocked, and she's in the cellar probably looking at inventory or putting things away, and a slight earthquake rolled through, and the ground fell away from her, and everything in that cellar then fell on top of her. She lived. People found her, they got to her, she was able to live, but that was extremely traumatic. She was basically buried alive, gasping for air. She couldn't move. She couldn't really scream out. She couldn't do anything. So when she was asleep that night in the same location, all of that came rushing back to her. So Edgar explained all this in the reading. And he said so it'd be good to maybe not visit that town again. But now that you have the awareness that this is what happened, you can kind of work through it. In that life of her current, Patricia, she had a standard life. And this is when Edgar would start talking to people about sometimes fears that we don't have a justification for come through and they feel so visceral. They feel so real. I mean, when I was a child and I would see a mouse, it was as if I could feel it starting to crawl over my body, even though I'm 5 feet away and I just jumped on the chair. It was as if all of a sudden my whole body would tighten up and I could just feel it crawling all over me from just the sight of it. Hers was location based. He had to explain that right now, your current life, Patricia, it's a comfortable life. You're fine. You don't really have traumatic things happening. You don't really have, you're just comfortable. You have a normal, what we would call just normal, comfortable. You're not too rich and expensive and glamorous, and you're not broke and starving, right? This was all from past life. They do another case study. This one was even kind of more what I think a lot of people can resonate with. It was a younger girl. She was like 20. And I believe her name was, let me double check. Young girl that reached out to Edgar because she was headed into college, or she was in her first year of college. And she didn't really know what to study, and she was asking why it was so hard for her to make decisions. Jane. Her name was Jane. She was a 21-year-old with almost disabling inferiority complex. She had almost a disabling inferiority complex. She couldn't make decisions. She didn't think she was good enough. She definitely didn't think she could do anything. She's in like her first year of college, and she's wondering why she's even there. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. What's happening here? Because nothing in her current life was presenting justification as to why we have those feelings. And it was crippling her. She couldn't foresee why go to college or what to even study because she's really not good enough. She even asked in one of her questions to him, "Do I have a good enough IQ to be in college?" And Casey, and during the reading, had to respond with, "Well, yes, and that all depends on how you're testing yourself." Like, every question this poor young girl had was basically, "I don't think I'm worthy enough. I don't think I'm smart enough. I can't make a decision. I'm this, I'm that." I mean, she felt so low about herself. When her parents didn't treat her that way, none of her peers treated her that way. So Casey had to reveal that A, she should really probably study the piano and definitely string instruments because in many of her past lives she was a pianist and a music teacher and or music teacher I should say. So she's already equipped with those skills. We will talk more about that when I get into the vocational aspect. So he was trying to present that to her like, have you ever touched a piano? And she said, yeah, I did when I was young, but I didn't think it was really for me. So I just stopped. Inferiority complex, right? So he said, no, 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 that's what you should be doing. And of course, beautiful beings, I'm paraphrasing here, I'm doing a retelling. So he tried to convince her of that. This is what you should go to school for. Then this is what was interesting because of the time frame that this was happening. This was in the 30s that he's doing this reading. He tells this young girl that she should not marry anyone, not even consider getting married until she is well into age, which is not what would been the norm of 1930 something. I mean, most women, by the time you are graduated from college, if you do go to college, that is when you are supposed to get married, right? He was telling her he didn't want her to even consider marriage until she was closer to 40. Very odd, right? And he had to explain to her that because of a past life, she would not choose a good mate because her mates in the past belittled her, beat her, gave her of the current life of Jane all of these insecurities. So to overcome that, A, you can excel with piano. Go for it. Stay away from marriage for quite a long time for you to build your self-esteem. That's what Edgar talked to her about. You have to build up your self-esteem. You have to get this confidence built up before you even consider being in a partnership, in a marriage, because your picker is broken. And so whoever you're going to pick is going to knock you down and knock you down, and you're never going to get through this. She took his advice. She did go to school. And she studied piano. She was actually very good at it. She then actually then studied more string instruments, took his advice, became a teacher. She lived a very good, comfortable life. It was just standard. You live, you work, you eat, you go out with friends. She had a very good, comfortable life. And for a very long time she did stay away from marriage. She did report that it was kind of difficult because of you don't do that so much, right? Peer pressure. It was a very spinster-esque time period. But later in life, when she had solidified enough self-confidence to be able to identify, "That's not how I should be treated. I'm worth more." Then she was able to start dating a healthy man and have a healthy relationship. So I'm sure many people can relate to these aspects, some form of this, because I can't, I mean, every conversation somewhere along the line, even if we're doing better in now as adults, is man, was my picker broken when I was young, right? Male, female, it doesn't matter, right? Relationships or the inferiority complex of why can't I make a decision? We can also see this in little kids. We try to give little kids those little moments to boost confidence or to make decisions for themselves, right? You you dress them in their clothes all the way until they're about 3, and then you get to go, "Hey, what do you wanna wear today?" And your kid might pick out the most strangest outfit on the planet, but that's the day that they get to decide, right? We try to give them all these little moments to develop themselves and to develop this decision making and to be comfortable within their own character and build that confidence. We do that as parents, right? Well, let's say you have a child that even if you're doing that with them and they just can't. Making a decision is like pulling teeth. They go into a tantrum, they start crying. And then they might start saying stuff like, "I don't know. I'm not good enough. I'm too stupid." Oh, it's the worst word on the planet. I hate the word stupid. I don't allow it, right? That sort of thing might not be because you're parenting wrong. It might have to do with residual karmic energy that can be overcome. So I hope everybody's kind of tracking with this. So when I do, and I'm going to give a personal example because she's allowed me to give this example. I do what I refer to as karmic timeline cleanses. And yes, am I working in the quantum field aspect of healing? Yes, but I rather call it karmic timeline cleanses to get the full scope. What I do then is I go into your timeline and I all this stuff all this stuff that doesn't need to be there energetically. Jeez, I having a hard time talking today, folks. Um, I wipe it away. I get rid of it. So I was doing one client, lovely woman, who in a past life it was some tragic stuff. Very tragic. And normally when I have to clean up a timeline, it is usually based on some either very traumatic stuff that happened in a past life, from physical to emotional to mental, what have you, and or how a person has passed away. Um, Out of my experience doing this, and also just being around people when they've passed away, we can say the most awful things to ourselves when we're dying. We really can as humans. We can blame ourselves. We can vow things that we definitely should not be vowing. We can say some horrible things to ourselves when we're in the act of dying, ing. And that creates some kind of karmic energy that can also carry through, especially when you make a vow, especially when you say things. So, in this particular case, this poor young girl who was in this life, she was beautiful. She was, I mean, she was a beautiful young girl. I cannot express just how naturally beautiful this girl was. Well, at that time, she was living in a rural area. Things are difficult. It was more the depression-ish, let's say, early. And, you know, pretty ones do get picked on. Pretty ones do get a lot of bullying. It's always been that way, especially when you're in a group of people, a town, a community that are on hard times, that the kids are digging in the dirt right along with the parents trying to grow some food, that kind of thing. She didn't come from big means. It was just that she was that pretty. Well, in this particular instance, a group of them kind of caught up with her. And from the onset of verbal bullying. It then got into physical bullying, and things got very out of hand with this pack of young people. She didn't die in that instance, but then later at home, a few days later, from all of the trauma and hurt and infections and all of it, right? She was beat pretty bad. Kids in a pack, it can happen. But when she was dying, she just kept telling herself, gosh, if I wasn't so pretty, this wouldn't have happened to me. I don't ever want to be pretty again. I don't want anyone to see me as pretty. She kept saying all of these horrible things because she was blaming herself. She was blaming herself for what these kids had done, saying, man, this is all my fault because I'm too pretty. Well, now let's move forward to a new life. How do you think that plays out? It played out in this particular and she's a beautiful woman. She's a lovely lady. She's a lovely lady who chose to always hide herself. Never really show like any of her feminine qualities. She would be the woman that you're always going to see in a flannel and you know, a hoodie or she was always hiding any aspect of her beauty. And I'm not knocking women who dress like that. I dress like that, right? It's not that. It was the emotional reason as to why she never treated herself to a massage or any kind of pedicure or manicure. Why she never put on any makeup. Why she never did this. Why she never tried to present herself in any form of what is generalized feminine attributes or looking like, right? Or experiencing. She just didn't do it at all. And she wasn't even bothered by that. It wasn't that she was even bothered by it. She's married, she's got kids. I mean, she has a life. What it was is that, her girlfriends might call her up and say, hey, let's go to the spa. And she, no, 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 that's not for me. Or her girlfriends would, hey, I'm going to go get my hair cut. You want to come with and then we'll have lunch later? No, no, no. I don't need to go to the beauty parlor. I mean, she would cut her own hair many times. It was to that extent that she was not participating in what many of us feminine energies that are especially in a female body of form that choose to be identify as a woman, we partake in sometimes. Let's put some lotion on. Let's get our nails done. And I'm not trying to say that it has to be that way. It was that she was limiting her experience of quality time with friends because all of her female friends wanted to go off and do female things. And it was not based on anything that occurred in this current life. It was based off of what had tragically happened in a past life. And she was carrying on what she told herself when she was dying. I should never be pretty again. So she just never partook in being pretty. So is that a big thing? No. But when it does affect our lives in ways that we just don't really identify, she never really noticed that she loses out on quality time with her girlfriends a lot because she is quick to say, no, I'm not, I don't feel, that's not really for me. I'm not going to go. She never went out because of it. She never really got together with girlfriends. It's unfortunate. So all these little things can be linked to what is karmic residue energy. and we just don't know where they come from. And we might live with them for so long we don't really see them as an issue until someone presents that to them. I presented to her, "Hey, no, you need to go out with your girlfriends. It's okay. Feel some feminine, right? You enjoy it." It had to be presented. I did a reading recently that I've done a reading for them in the past. They did not realize that they were a hoarder until I had to present that to them because I'm being presented with their life. And this was, a year ago or so, I informed them, yes, you have a hoarding issue. Um, well, then they start actually looking around. They acknowledged, oh my goodness, I do have this. Many people, we walk around living life and doing things and expressing in fear when we're not even aware of it. Well, then I just did a recent reading for her as well, and she asked me, where does it stem from? And it stems from many a things, and some past lives, some current, whatnot. The point is that many of us have aspects to ourselves that we're not even aware of until someone points it out to us. And then even when it's pointed out to us, we might not really know where it's from. And if we don't know where it's from, it's sometimes hard to work through. Emotional, mental, physical, karmic residue is usually the case. Back to me with the mice. I mean, I literally, it felt like they were crawling all over me if I just saw one. I had to work through it, but I knew why. I knew why that was going on. So sometimes identifying the why helps, and that's why people get Akashic readings. It truly is. We need to use our Akashic time for grander purposes like that. Kind of like when he steps into then the vocational aspect. So interesting. I got a question today about that in a way. The vocational karma. So this is actually good, quote unquote, karmic residue. Or could it be bad? We're going to look at two different case studies. Oh, Chloe said that I might be able to use hers. Chloe, I don't know if I remember yours, but that's okay. If it triggers my mind, I might use it, but thank you for giving me permission. I do always ask for permission um, to use someone's story as an example. Um, or if it's or if the example is very commonplace. Like the hoarding one, um, I am learning everyone, a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people have that in some degree or another. Everything in this world is to degree. And please remember, all things in 3D is designed for you to start choosing yourself in hopes of healing mentally, emotionally, physically. All things in 3D are designed to do so. Choose yourself. So, vocational karma. He was, pardon me one moment, folks. Well, thank you, Jackie. Jackie said, I definitely need a reading from you. Thank you. Um, yes, I want to put it out there too, lovely beings. Um, I have a January special going on um, for half off readings, so only $35 via phone. I might be extending that because I have family stuff going on that might end up limiting my time a bit if I have to travel. Um, that I'll probably extend it into February. So, Jackie, if you need a reading, anybody else who needs a reading, I will most likely, if I can't get to you in January, then I will definitely help you out in February for the same discount. Chloe said she cuts her own hair too. Yeah, sometimes I do. I don't know. Um, it was more so not partaking, right? Um, Feminine energy comes in all different degrees, but to at least experience some of it. If you're masculine or feminine, it's a good idea. So, with the vocational, there was a young man that approached Edgar. Once again, what should I go to school? Should I not go to school? His family owned a like printing company. Think back when it was still they're using tiles for a lot of things to print, and um, the family kind of oversaw a lot of this young man's work and education and upbringing. He didn't have too much choice. And so he's working in the family business, but he reaches out to Edgar and says, "Hey, I don't know why I'm kind of held very tightly by my family. And I also, based on that, I don't really know if I should go to college, if I should study something. What should I do? Because I really don't want to be a part of the family business. Like, I'm good. I do not want to do this. How do I get away from all this?" So Edgar spoke to the boy about um, him being kind of controlled by others had been an ongoing theme. So often when I do readings, when I do timeline cleanses, when I even speak here about any of this Edgar Cayce material and or a lot on Fridays as well, I talk about themes because I see it as if this is your frequency story, that is an ongoing story. Every life you live is just kind of a new chapter to this beautiful new story. Well, there's always in every book there's ongoing themes. So I often refer to what people refer to as karma. I refer to it as a theme because I don't want to give it this uh, dogmatic weight that the word karma tends to do these days. So with this young man, we're going to reference it as more of it's a theme that's been traveling with him, that he's been kind of in different positions that he was very much kind of held in place by some kind of authority. It could have been a boss, could have been a king, could have been a pharaoh. I mean, Casey really went through like, you've been told what to do many lives over, and it was decided for you, right? But what's also interesting in the same lives that Edgar is referring to this kind of um, being told what to do theme, this man was also picking up great skills with like architecture. He had at least 4 lives that even if he was building for the king or the pharaoh and doing exactly what he is told, he is still creating magnificent things. He's a part of building structures that we still have today that are some of the great wonders of the world. So, vocational. This young man in his current life, he was a fair artist, right? Not anything to really write home about. But then Edgar Cayce was like, you would fare very well studying architecture because it's in you. You did it over and over and over again. And oftentimes, what we produce in today's world is just an updated version to what we had done in the past. Please take that in. Often, what we do in the current life what we're interested in, what we create, what we're drawn to, is because we had done it many multiple times in the past. The skills and awareness are present. It's just, we have to remember. We have to look at something and unlock it. So Edgar, urged the kid to go to college and study architecture, which kind of, it is reported that when the young man received that, it kind of shocked him. I mean, architecture was nowhere near his reference of interest. But then when Edgar said, hey, maybe take a class or two and feel it out, this young man came to find out that he very much understood it, that the math was pretty easy, that all these concepts, all these designs, pretty easy. To the point that he was a part of a small group that were awarded to go travel in Europe and Egypt to study the architecture all over there, Greece, a very small handful, free scholarship to go do this because he excelled so much at something that he didn't really know he would. So, in today's world, it's a bit different because we're in such an awakening time period. So when I say what draws you in, what piques your interest, what you might excel at unknowingly, right? You just kind of sit down and it's there. And you can just do it. For us in today, because Edgar Cayce Life Skill Study is supposed to take 100 years ago and bring it into today's world. It is much easier for us to have that key and unlock the door into what a vocation should be. Or that hobby you have that could actually be very lucrative for you. Much easier than 100 years ago when you did very having a reading would have pointed you in the right direction even more so. But it's because we have much more accessibility. It's not like those kids 100 years ago were getting on Google or here on YouTube and Googling something, and all of a sudden that lights a spark inside them, the aha. They didn't have that. So for Edgar to point someone in the right direction, kudos to him, and it was needed more so. In today's world, what sparks your interest? What you happen to just be fairly good at, as if it's easy. Like my mother, for example, she has a green thumb. People that have green thumbs like that, I mean, she was growing stuff in Northern Illinois that shouldn't even be grown in Northern Illinois because of the temperatures. I mean, she has this amazing green thumb. That came from somewhere. It didn't come from this current life. Those who are amazing with art and music or even computers, that comes from ancient technology because this stuff is probably very simple, right? Those who understand math or astronomy, that it just sits with them. They get it, got it. They're good. For me, it's writing. It's being able to also read all these books and be able to put it in today's language for you to receive and then go do. But that's because I've been a messenger many a times over. That's all I am. That's all I am. But the message could come from I'm using source material, or I'm writing something, or I'm giving you an Akashic message. That's all it is I'm being a messenger. But that's because I've been a messenger many times over. So it's very easy for me to talk. or write to deliver a message. For others, it what have you, right? Whatever might get that little spark going, whatever we sit down with. Oh, like when men, I've witnessed so many men who people would have probably just ran off. I had an uncle who was illiterate, but man, could he could fix any machine problem you had. That came from somewhere. I've seen many a men like that could problem solve very complex, like, building situations, something's being built, and all of a sudden, that one man comes in, looks at everything, and he goes, "This is how we have to fix this and do this." And he just showed up. It comes from somewhere. Gifts, talents, skills, interests, and it is always usually linked to past lives. So, that is one way to look at vocational. That is also one way to maybe look at if you got a side hustle right now that you would rather really hope that it starts making better money for you. Well, then maybe start identifying it as this is my gift, talent, and skill. I do have more confidence within this. I can approach this as if it's mine to do. Many times, side hustles stay flat because we just see them as side hustles, a little extra here and there because it interests us. Hmm, maybe it's something we do need to focus on to make it more lucrative. But here's the other side to that coin of vocational karma. There was a case study after this that wrote about in this book. Interesting story. The current man, he had an ability in a way to kind of bring people together and sort out problems and get everybody on the same page. Interesting how he did it though. And so when Edgar did a reading for this man, and it had actually nothing to do with vocational, his wife actually reached out to Edgar because they had a very interesting relationship. Edgar revealed that in this man's past life, he had many, many lives of, hmm, let's say, being that tricky politician. He also had a couple of lives of, let's say, being a international, what our words would be of a international spy. This man was a unique character because it was as if he could get anything he wanted from people. He could con them, he could manipulate them, he could bring groups of, and at this time it was still the 1930s doing this reading, he could bring groups of strangers, mostly men, together, and he would get what he wanted at the end of it. So I'm not saying he was a good man. Not at all. Past life karma residue. He knew exactly how to pull all the strings and what to say and to look into people and do this. And he might have even adopted some psychic abilities to do so along the way of all those lives. Makes it very easy to manipulate others if you are a ill will psychic. You see it all the time. But his wife had actually reached out because his sexual drive and their encounters and their life together was I don't know how much I can put on here on YouTube, was it was a sexual mess. He was obsessed with it in a way. And so she reached out to Edgar as to, I married this man. I don't even know why I married this man now. Um, Also, a lot of drinking was involved. He got that woman drinking very heavily to the point that even when she sobers up and talking to Edgar, she will admit, I'll probably go right back to having a problem. She knew she was being extremely manipulated sexually, physically, emotionally, mentally, with drinking, with all sorts of stuff. She knew, but she didn't know how that even occurred and what to do about it. So I will probably assume they stayed inside his life, but I will also assume she had bad pickers before. But see, these people, this man and woman, they were together before. Lots of escapades during some life in ancient Persia where wine and sex, you can think about it like kind of in the Greeks. The Persians did the same at a time period where all of that ran rampant, as we know through our history, right? They were there together, living the same lifestyle, doing the same thing. And he, at the same time, was also like this government manipulator. He didn't actually have a position, but man, he pulled all the strings. He got what he wanted. When they were in Persia, also living with a ton of sin and idolatry in a lot of ways. I mean, it was just crazy. So they were repeating it. They were repeating it. And this poor woman, something within her, she had lived enough lives that something in her said, I'm doing this again. This has to stop. I need to learn how to make it, how to have it stop. But I got such this magnetic pull to this. I don't know why. Cayce gave her a lot of suggestions. That's all he can do is give a lot of suggestions as to how to rectify that situation, how to change that situation, because her soul really did want to change. His main suggestion to her was, you were with him before in Persia, you're doing it again now, but you had a whole lot of lives in between that you witnessed a lot of miracles. You witnessed great faith. Focus on that. That you also, even if you're in kind of a pit of karmic residue right now that is not healthy, that you do not deserve, that you do not want, there are always lives in between that also have karmic residue, hence, like the kid that needed to study architecture, that can be very positive and great. Tons of skills and awareness. That then, if you change your focus in this life, focus on faith, focus on the fact that you've witnessed many miracles. She was actually of the family who witnessed Lazarus being brought back from the dead. She was there. So Cayce said, focus on that, and you will be able to get away from this. Now, she did. It did take her quite a while because we're working through a lot of things. It took her quite a while, but she was able, both of them changed. Not so much the man, she eventually he died. That's all I could say is he eventually passed. That's and she even reported that when he died, she felt like he was still trying to pull on her from the other side. because through the rest of their marriage, she was pulling away, pulling away, pulling away, holding faith, not drinking, pulling away, pulling away. And to understand, beautiful stars, this was 100 years ago. It wasn't so easy to just get a divorce for a woman. So she was really holding her own, developing her faith. She's going to school. She started a Bible study group. She was really holding her own while still being married to this man who he changed a bit. He changed enough. What released her was that he died, but she reported that for years it felt like he was still pulling from her. This magnetic pull up until just a few years before she died. So, not such good karmic vocational residue, as in that man came in this world knowing he had skills to manipulate. He is that horrible used car salesman that he could manipulate co-workers, men of all sorts of character and standing to get what he wants, and he used that for his vocational quote unquote. It was the next big deal, the next big deal, the next big deal. Suck 'em dry, next big deal. While also living all the characteristics of a very sinful life from Persia. She, though, had enough awareness within her, her soul saying, this has to stop. This has to stop. We have to make it stop. Do the effort. Acknowledge, accept, forgive, do the work. Why out of all the stories that this man could probably have chosen from, I found it because this was all of chapter 6. There you go, folks. That was chapter 6. Just those 2 case studies. But I think he was a wise man to decide to use these 2. And I think Hugh helped him. Edgar Cayce's son, who is still alive in 1969, I believe. Actually, I know. He was. Um, 2 different extremes. One very, some issues of feeling controlled by the family, but yet the soul saying, stand up on your own. Choose a different path than your family and you'll be fine. And Edgar said, architecture, you're going to do great. You'll be perfectly comfortable. Edgar would say the word comfortable a lot. And then you have this other extreme of a married couple that their sinful lifestyle, and I will also say, was attached to his vocational. So, when he would get these men together for manipulation purposes, do not think that uh, sex and drugs and drinking were not involved as well. That was his way of being. So attached to his vocational, but also attached to this other entity, this woman that he's married to that is saying, like the young man, I don't want to do this. I know that I there's something different. I feel like I'm just in this spinning wheel over and over again. The definition of insanity. That's what I was trying to get to, folks. So one is like a low case of what the actual definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, which for me, oftentimes when we talk about karma, that is what that is. We're just not aware of it. But in both cases, that individual's soul is saying, we can stop this. You don't have to be on lockdown by your family unit anymore. You can make decisions. You don't have to participate in your husband's escapades. You can make your own decisions. And once we do that, life can start changing up. And because your timeline of all these lives that you've lived is a spiral, they're just connected like a telephone cord. It's just a connected spiral that keeps going and going and going. Well, we can also kind of see that as a wheel, hamster wheel. And what tends to happen is if we keep just staying in one of these themes, and this karmic residue just going over and over and over and over again with it, eventually the soul who has experienced a great amount of other themes, other witnessing, other examples as to how to change, will eventually say, hey, we're going to keep going in this spiral, but we don't need to spin in place. I hope that's making sense to everyone. And it is based on choice. It is all based on choice. And so I'm going to emphasize again that all of 3D, third dimensional consciousness. Consciousness is frequency, frequency is consciousness. You live your frequency. If you accept it or not, that's what you're living. At the very end of chapter 6. So all of everything in 3D consciousness frequency is designed by you to have you choose to step out of the hamster wheel of all these themes and start healing, accepting, forgiving, loving oneself. And periodically, as they close out chapter 6, I will read this. Yeah. It is not out of keeping here to consider the Oriental belief, so talking about actually karma, that the soul is allowed one comfortable, quote unquote, comfortable reincarnation for every 6 lives of traumatic development or turbulent development. The theory being that the lives grow correspondingly tougher as the soul sheds the ties that bind to the earth. As the soul sheds the ties that bind them to the earth, meaning that 3D and even a bit of 5, but that's a whole different episode, usually on Friday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Shed the ties that bind them to the earth 3D consciousness. So, I'll read it like this. It is not out of keeping here to consider. So they're saying, we want you to keep thinking about this. Karmic belief that the soul is allowed one comfortable reincarnation for every 6 lives of arduous development, the theory being that the lives grow correspondingly tougher as the soul sheds the ties that bind it to the earth. Correspondingly tougher, that karmic residue will keep going and going, and then, oh man, really bad hard times. It feeds and grows and festers and becomes more, and then that keeps going. Now that amount of tragedy keeps going, and then that amount, and it just keeps correspondingly add on, get tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher as the soul sheds the ties that bind them to the earth. So luckily, every about 6 lives, we get to take a break from it being so damn tough. That does not mean that the tough just goes away. It comes back. Everything in 3D consciousness, 3D living is designed, is tough for us to shed what is tying us to it. And the only way we can do that is when we go, my story's going to keep going, but I'm going to get off this hamster wheel. This theme, of however tough it may be, I'm going to change it up. If I have a crappy picker, right? We just pick really bad relationships. It might just not be because of the trauma of today. It could be from many a lives. I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to heal myself before I even start another relationship. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to know what I'm worth that I'm worthy. I'm going to be able to identify the douchebags before they even approach me. Things like that. Get off the hamster wheel. I'm going to keep questioning what my purpose is. Your purpose is what excites you as far as vocational. Your purpose is what excites you, vocational speaking. All of that stuff, all of the little themes from big fears to little fears to all of the stuff in 3D consciousness, living experience. People say that it's to learn. I just read that it's truly there so you can break the ties that bind you to 3D. You already know. Your soul has lived so much. I can truly guarantee that out of anyone who's listening to this at any time. This is a timeless message right now. At any time, I can guarantee you, your soul has been here over and over and experienced so much that you're not learning. You know, and your soul knows. It's time to choose you. That's the difference. Get out of the hamster wheel, the cycle of insanity that is attached to karmic residue that makes every life harder and harder and harder and harder. Everything in 3D is here and designed for you to choose yourself. And the moment you do that, and you begin to truly heal. You begin to make better choices. You begin to break free and elevate your conscious awareness through self compassion and compassion for others. Begins to break the ties that bind you to 3D. It's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. So, karma is not this thing that has to continue, but it takes you choosing you. And I can't do that for you, but I can surely encourage you to do so. I love you all so much. Thank you for being around. And Chloe just put her chloescrystals.com in the chat. Go get some crystals for Miss Chloe. And Miss Chloe, if you're still listening, I haven't been able to reach out to you yet. But Lucky Stone 888 and I, for our Saturday night shows, I think would love to have you on as a guest to talk about all your crystals, because that is one of your specialties, not mine. I don't know much about crystals. And you can definitely plug all you want, my dear, because yes, we would love to have you on. I'm hoping in February, my dear. I will be reaching out. So that's something to look forward to. And thank you for reminding me that Lucky Stone 888 and I for Esoteric Tea have moved to Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a good time, man, especially in the winter. You're home, ain't nothing going on. You're cold. Get your blanket, get your cocoa, settle in at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Esoteric Tea with Lucky and I. So thank you all for listening. It's been good, folks. It's been good. Thank you for being here for me. Um, Whenever that is, hit that like button for me, leave a comment below, and I hope this did help. I really do. So I'll see y'all later. Friday morning, this Friday, January 10th, I will be diving deep into the Akashic message again for the year of 2025. Good night, everyone. Cheers.